Hey, deserving listeners, 90 Day Fiancé. Let's watch.
With each other, I'm hopeful that we can build from here and move on. Ask all your questions you were going to ask.
Did you enjoy sex with him? Did he do better? Like, did you feel better than what I did?
Yeah, this is a real comment. I will commend Asuelu for keeping it together and not getting angry, because it wouldn't be helpful. Plus, even though he says he only kissed someone, it seems likely that, or actually he did say that he did receive oral sex, but, you know, in all likelihood it was more than that. Who knows? But then he gave her a hall pass and she took it. And I think maybe it went farther than he might have intended or whatever, but anyway, so she just revealed to him that it wasn't just kissing that she did with someone, she had sex with someone. And they're still communicating. According to Kalani, she's saying, I'm not the sort of person to have sex with someone and then not communicate with them anymore. And okay, but I wonder if that's a justification to keep a relationship as a possibility, which would be a rational thing for her to do, given how rocky her relationship is with Asuelu, either consciously or unconsciously, to be like, well, you know, if things don't work out with Asuelu, at the very least, it'd be good to date this person, you know, because we have a connection of some sort, but who knows. But I wouldn't recommend that if her intention, and she's verbally saying, I'm still in this marriage, then I would advise her to really explore for herself what she really wants. Because if she does want to continue with this other person, that's okay, but she needs to be more upfront with Asuelu and maybe break up. I don't know. But anyway, so he's now asking questions, and she's inviting the questions, and he's asking, was he better than me? And on one level, you can analyze that question or comment on that question as a toxic masculinity thing. It's just like the primary concern for the man is, have I been one-upped by someone else? And it's such a misguided question because, and it is resting on this assumption that somehow you are your partner's best sexual partner or best overall sexual partner they've ever had. And, you know, if someone has a number of partners before you, you know, there's a chance that you don't want to know the answer to that question. Or at the very least, you need to be okay with it not being the case. In the same way that if you think about the love of your life that you are absolutely going to spend the rest of your life with, and you're like, well, you know, there was that one person I dated for like 3 weeks, and I feel like, you know, that was a whiz bang of a time, and really nothing ever compares to that. Does that diminish your relationship with your partner? Now, a lot of men, but really people of all genders, but, you know, particularly men, given the messages that we incur that have been, you know, that we've been brainwashed by, that we must be our partner's best sexual partner. Or else we are less of a man, or our partner doesn't appreciate us, or something like that. It's really weird. So you could argue that this question is generated from that ridiculous place. Or he just has a legitimate question. There's nothing abnormal about a human being insecure of like, well, if this other person is better than me, then that might mean you won't want to be with me and you'll never be satisfied with me. You know, a similar kind of question might arise when a husband in a heterosexual relationship is caught looking at pornography, and especially if the pornography is of a particular type of woman that is different than his wife. You know, if it's a white wife and the guy's looking at Asian porn or something like that. And I've treated couples with this concern where the wife will feel like, I'm not good enough. He really wants to be with an Asian woman, or he really wants to be with these other people. So, you know, there is that comparison, like, am I not enough? And so that's possible where this question is coming from. Am I not enough? Now, it's a worthy question. It's fine, and it gets the ball rolling. But when I hear this question, and I will almost always hear this question from individuals in his shoes, I will stop the conversation temporarily and say, so there's a lot of things that you're going to want to know about, and certainly let's air it out. But let me explain the landscape here, because that might be kind of an advanced question that we want to address further down in the therapy course. Not something we want to do. This is the first question that he has about the situation, because the damage could happen if there's not some foundation for the question and answer time about this sort of thing. The other thing that I would lay out is that each person should very much try to tell the truth. And if they are worried about the truth, then they have a hall pass, if you will, to say, I don't want to answer that question right now, maybe in the future. So instead of lying or white lying, just saying, I defer that question for a later date. I'll definitely answer it later, but I don't want to, I'm not comfortable answering it right now. Or just tell the truth. The other thing I would lay out, the reason why I say that is because a lot of people will lie reflexively in this situation because they're just thinking about the next 5 minutes instead of the next 10 years or the next 30 years, because usually these things will be revealed, and then it's just another infidelity, if you will, because the lies have been discovered. But the other foundation I would lay out for him is there are questions that you're going to want to know the answer to when you are in a situation like this, and you're absolutely fine thinking them and maybe even asking them, but you might not want to know the answer. So we might be careful at this point in terms of what questions and subjects are asked and discussed. Not that we would shut them down forever, but it's possible that there's another road. What I would ask him is, okay, never mind the question, where's that question generating from? Is it a worry you're going to lose Kalani? Or is it some, verbatim or literal worry that you're not her best lover that she's ever had? Or, what is it exactly? Is it coming from a place of fear? Because if it's coming from that place of fear, one, the fear is probably rational, given his situation with Kalani right now, a fear of losing her, regardless. The person she was with might have been the worst partner of all time she's ever had, but their relationship is on very thin ice, if at all. So one is just sort of accepting the reality of it and not trying to turn towards all these questions to try to scramble some sort of thicker ice underneath you, because that just won't happen, and just living with that insecurity. Or maybe she could reassure him more directly and say, like, look, regardless of what happened with the other guy, I'm dedicated to trying to make it work with you, Asuelu, and I've always loved having sex with you. So, let's just not really get in. Maybe there's some other way of answering it without answering it and taking those kind of risks.
Or
Okay, do you want me to be honest?
yep.
Okay. The difference between you and him is that when me and you have sex, it's about you. It's about what you want. It's about you getting what you need from it.
Yikes. Okay. Yeah. I mean, he asked for the honest truth, and he deserves to hear that, because if this is true, which we could imagine, then he needs to know that, and he needs to change that. So let's see what he says.
Really understand, because when we have sex, like, I try to do what you want, but usually
When you have sex with a girl, you're supposed to try to make her finish,
I usually do that.
Do you?
So it actually is like he's better than me.
I'm not going to say that.
Right. It probably can't be reduced to such a simple metric. Was he better than me or not? For her, she might be thinking, well, you just make choices that are not as pleasant for me in bed. I'm not saying you're worse than him. I'm just saying I have a worse time. But if you chose to prioritize me and how I feel, then things would be maybe even better than it was with that guy. So it's not about his innate manhood. It's just choices that he makes, and you choose a different path. And so now I would wonder, given if I were there as a therapist, I would wonder how often they've talked about this before, because there's a possibility that for Asuelu, this is very new information for him. And maybe they've talked about it kind of in the past, but it hasn't been emphasized enough or something. And in that scenario, that's different, right? Because she was unfortunately putting up with something that he should probably know better. But, I think when they met, he was pretty young, and also I think had issues regarding just mature relationships, I'm guessing. Anyway, so it's possible that she never gave him a chance to learn from what she wanted. That's not uncommon in relationships, particularly around sex, particularly when there's a problem. People often just don't talk about it, but some people do. Anyway, or has she already given him many signals and communications along these lines, and he just chooses to ignore it, or doesn't have the capacity to really let it be absorbed or something? Those are two different scenarios, and I can't really tell which one it is. Either way, I also would be thinking this couple, especially knowing what I know, because I've seen or at least some of the troubles, I've seen the tip of the iceberg, the amount of trust violations and contempt and the amount of toes that they have out the door, it's so high right now that there's a long climb just to get to a place where they might even begin to think about working on the relationship. I get the impression like they are basically running on fumes, their relationship at this point.
Let me say this differently. How your selfishness of how self-centered you are in your everyday life about like, let me do this and let me do that and leave my wife to do everything. You do that also sexually. So everything revolves around you.
Yeah, that's not hard to imagine. And that's unfortunate. That's too bad. And I wasn't under that impression. The way they talk about their sex life, it sounded like they were both enjoying it. Now, maybe she did enjoy it somewhat, but having been with someone else, she's like, oh, there's like this whole other level to sex that I thought I had a good sex life, but I had no idea how bad my sex life was until I actually was with a partner that prioritizes me and them. We're both on the priority list. So it's unfortunate. Yeah, but there's a road to wellness for the two of them if they choose to go down that road. He would have to do a lot of changing, though, it seems. Hey, deserving listeners, today's episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Sometimes in life, we are faced with tough choices, and the path forward isn't always clear. And some of you might even be facing a tough choice right now. Well, for me, I like to fully explore all the options. That usually helps me to feel more confident moving forward. And sometimes it really helps to talk with someone and get their perspective and maybe their wisdom. And of course, therapy can help with this. I never planned on specializing in this area when I started out as a therapist, but over time, a lot of clients have come to me when they are facing tough choices that they're having a hard time figuring out what to do. Well, one option worth exploring is BetterHelp. If you're thinking of starting therapy, it's worth giving a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient and suited to your schedule. And also you can switch therapists at any time at no additional charge. So let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/Kirk today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Kirk.
I think that's why I'm getting pissed off, because you have no idea how I feel and how hurt I've been through everything that you've done. So what you feel is a little tiny piece of what I felt. Even the questions you're asking, you're not saying like, oh, what did I do to make you feel that way?
Right. Yeah, I was halfway thinking that, but I'm now very aware of that fact, and she's good to be able to recognize that. And she's probably been in this space for so many years that she has it well articulated in her mind, and thus she can articulate it and notice it as it's happening. Usually when you're being mistreated in the beginning, you just feel bad, but when you get chronically mistreated, you really notice the pattern as it's happening. Like, here we go. I had sex with someone and enjoyed it, and he actually said it was okay that I did because he cheated on me because of all the terrible things that have been happening in our relationship. And the only thing he's interested in is how he compares. This selfish idea of like where he is on the podium, is he in first place or not? And there's no concern about how I feel about the fact that he cheated on me in the first place and has an infection of some sort, and that he just did that, and maybe he's done it multiple other times, and I just didn't find out because he didn't have an infection in his mouth. So, no concern for how you're treating me. I'm glad she can. I'm sad that she's going through this. I'm glad she can at least see it and know she deserves better.
What did I do to make you go to someone else? I didn't want to be with anybody else. I only wanted to be with you.
Now I feel like you want to be with him, you don't want to be with me.
Yeah, it's just all from his perspective. It's not unusual for someone to temporarily and at times be in that space of selfishness, but given everything that we've seen from him, I really do think that he is stuck at a younger age due to something that went wrong, and he has not, I've talked about this before, maybe not in the context of Asuelu, though, that for some people, when they are mistreated or neglected growing up, they will have this sense that they are not responsible for other people's feelings. People will often think of them as being narcissistic, but that's not the term we want to use for that. It's more dependent or childlike. And they were, I could go down the whole, you can listen to my deep dive on dependent personality disorder, but it's in that area, or passive aggressive personality disorder. I did a deep dive on that as well. For these individuals, due to traumas growing up, long story short, they cannot conceive of themselves as being responsible for someone else's feelings. The thing that I'll say in brief is that when you have a 7-year-old child, they should not feel responsible for the parents' feelings. Now, in some situations, they should, like if they, are eating at the dinner table and they just take their plate of spaghetti and just throw it across the room, and the parents are like, I have to clean that up now, or that really hurts my feelings because I made that food for you. You would want your kid to have some empathy in that situation, but it shouldn't go far beyond that. Like, they shouldn't be concerned. Like, if they're struggling in school, say the 7-year-old is struggling in school, and they come home and they're in a bad mood, and the parents are going through a lot of stresses at their work or with their health or something like that, and the kid comes home and is being grumpy. What you don't want is that 7-year-old to put aside their feelings and over concern themselves with the parents' problems. What you want is the 7-year-old to be a 7-year-old and to be immature and to figure things out at that phase of life. And so what these dependent people or passive aggressive people, what will happen to them is they're stuck in that mindset where, like in a healthy situation, you have the grumpy 7-year-old who comes home from school, and the parents start talking about how, maybe the 7-year-old, he overhears the parents that are stressed out about money or something. In a healthy situation, the 7-year-old will not over-concern themselves with the parents' issues. The 7-year-old will maybe not even really pay attention to it because they're more concerned about their own grumpiness. And that's the phase of life that you want a kid to be in. They'll get there eventually where they will start to concern themselves with their parents, but they need time to develop and sort of cook at those ages where they're much more self-centered. Well, for people that have complications during those age ranges, they are stuck in that mindset where even as adults, they still just have no concept that their actions are impacting other people. They have no concept that other people's feelings are their responsibility. They're stuck in this childish point of view that the world revolves around them. And it could look narcissistic, and you could frame it that way, but it's not anything close to narcissistic personality disorder. It's just a childish sense of responsibility. And he gives a lot of signs of that. I can't know that, of course, because this show's edited and who knows what's happening. But the way that it kind of looks, he just seems kind of bewildered. He's seeing things through his eyes, right? It'd be like the analogy to this situation, because she's being very real, and for us watching, we can be like, oh my God, our heart breaks for her in terms of all the things that she's been through, and we only know the tip of the iceberg. And all I can think of is like, well, is he better than me in bed? The analogy is the grumpy kid comes home from school and feels like the teacher is being unfair to him, and the parents' lives are just in shambles. And there's some indications, if the 7-year-old was really paying attention in an adult way, would note that the parents are stressed out about work, they're stressed out about health, they're stressed out about parenting the other kids, they're stressed out about money, they're stressed out about chores. But what the 7-year-old focuses, the parents are stressed out, and then they turn to the 7-year-old and they say, hey, kid, can you wash your hands and get ready for dinner? And the grumpy kid's like, no, no one listens to me about what I was saying about my teacher. And from a parent point of view, or from a human to human point of view, you might feel like, hey, kid, that's unfair. I'm dealing with way bigger issues than some stupid conflict that you're having with your teacher at school, when you probably deserved to have your teacher chastise you about something. So, grow up, kid. Well, you wouldn't say that because you understand how kids operate, and in their little cocooned world that you've created in a healthy way, they don't notice the struggles that you're going through in the global sense, and they're very stressed out about their micro world, and it's very important to them. So I'm going to account for that, maybe even take time to attend to that. But at the very least, I'm not going to go like, cry myself to sleep because my 7-year-old didn't sit down with me and ask me about my life for 2 hours. You wouldn't do that, hopefully. And parents who do that are parentifying their kids and creating problems. You should have your people that listen to you for 2 hours, peers and therapists and your own parents maybe, when you're an adult. But anyway, so similar, when Asuelu and Kalani are going through things, the mindset that Asuelu has, and you can imagine how hurtful that is. And I've been there before. It is so hurtful to be in Kalani's shoes, because you're not with a 7-year-old. You're with your soulmate, with your partner, a fellow adult, and your life is falling apart, and you're being explicit in your descriptions to that. You're pleading, and the Asuelus go, but what about my feelings? And it's maddening because you're just thinking, what do I have to do to be noticed? What do I have to do to get through? What is going on? And the other confusing part of it is that a lot of the Asuelus of the world can be really nice people, because they are. They do seem to have good hearts. They do seem to care. But there's this complete blind spot, the way a 7-year-old would have a blind spot, right? So, yeah, I think I hear that in Kalani's demeanor, that frustration that I was talking about. You can imagine it. Some of you might be able to relate to it, right?
I don't know what I want.
So, do you really have feelings for him?
Another possibility that I'll throw out there is that maybe at least a part of him is looking for a passive way out of the relationship, and he gave her a hall pass and is now prodding her to commit that she wants to be with him, so that he can say, oh, okay, well, then I guess the relationship is over and now I'm free and I can do whatever I want. Like, there's a possibility that that's at least in part what's happening. Okay, my wife told me that she watched this episode, that this season on, or the scenes they play where they show future scenes, there's like some really bad spoilers. So I always avoid these anyway, but I'm particularly gonna really click the pause button when I see this little chyron this season on. Even I want to react in a way that is authentic, which means I can't know what's happening in the future. Plus, the way that they do this, they kind of ruin their own show. It'd be like in the middle of Star Wars, they just show Luke Skywalker blowing up the Death Star, spoiler alert, in the middle of the movie. They'd be like, coming up on Star Wars, Luke Skywalker wins the day. It's like, well, I'm watching the goddamn movie. I'm watching the goddamn show. I'm committed. You don't have to spoil it for me to tease me to make sure I watch it. You know, I'm going to watch. Just stop it. And I feel like most people who watch the 90 Day Fiancé shows, you know, they're in it to win it. They're committed regardless of what happens. So you don't have to ruin every single, anyway. So I don't watch it. And, you know, I recommend that you consider that for yourself, for your own enjoyment of the show. But anyway, so that does it for that episode. Boy, did I yammer. It's almost midnight. My wife went to bed already. And everyone, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.